Be here now.
I like to let the bell take me into the silence. So that's part of the silence. The silence. Nobody said the silence was quiet. Because if you're pushing away the noise, your mind isn't silent. The art is to get the mind quiet, just so that we can watch the words without getting too lost in them, because the words are like birds that are flying through this wonderful hall. And usually these days, I always start by introducing myself as Ram Dass. Das means servant, and Ram means it's a name for God, one of the names of the nameless, one of the 1,000 names that can't be spoken. But I also use the name Ram as an acronym for rent a mouth. And in effect, you have rented my mouth to tell you what you already know. See, and I know that because when I say the wisest thing that comes into my being, you nod. So if you nod, how did you know? And if you already know, what do you need me to tell you? So we're dealing with this peculiar situation in which this meeting is totally irrelevant. Or if we're looking for motivation, it's that we keep needing to say it to ourselves over and over again until we hear it. I've been asked over the years many, many times, is this the onset of Armageddon? Or is this the Aquarian age, the new age? Is it all opening up? Is it all shutting down? Where are we in the yugas and kalpas? In the vast time spans in India, there are periods where it's all being created, there's periods where it's all stable, and then there are periods where it all decays. And you can look at civilizations, even in recorded history, and you can see that civilizations arise, exist, and decay. So it's reasonable to ask, as you look at the state of our insensitivity to the earth, as you look at our insensitivity to one another, to the animals, as we live with our fascination with technology and spiritual materialism, or scientific materialism, as the shopping malls become our temples. I mean, it's a little like Brave New World. It has a little bit of that kind of horror show quality about it. It's all being cemented over. It's those kinds of feelings. When you look at all that, it's not hard to see the model for it's all coming unglued. And this experiment we will write off. It just didn't work because humans were too greedy. The quarterly report was more important than the sustainability of the rainforest. They made that decision, that civilization. Do you remember? That's us. That's one take. And things are going to get worse and worse and worse. And inner cities are going to become all of it. And guns are going to be on everybody's back and shelf. And the prisons will have, what, a third of the population? Now they only have maybe over about 1 million now. I mean, could a civilization or a society be working if we have that many people in prison? Isn't that a clue that something isn't working? And that that's becoming one of our biggest industries? Certainly I find that fascinating. And when such a large percentage are in there for non-violent crimes, isn't that something about a political issue? Isn't there something about, and this is what fascinates me, about Armageddon or the Aquarian Age? First, let me say that whichever one is happening, whether it is all blossoming, the information age is with us, we're democratizing communication and information, there are all kinds of reasons. We are getting smarter about environment, more and more like Robert Mueller, who used to be assistant head of the United Nations for 35 years, said to me, I said, aren't you worried about the future of the environment? Because he's the head of the Peace University in Costa Rica. And he said, well, when I went to the Stockholm conference on the environment in the 70s, he said there was no government that had an environmental ministry. He said, when I went to the Rio conference, 118 or 138 did. He said, that's the way things change. Things are changing. Now, if you just stood back and said, well, this is going through a transformation, it's all going to be beautiful. I ask myself, if it's Armageddon or Aquarian Age, what difference does it make to me now? What will I do different? What will I do differently if I think it's all going to go to hell in a handbasket? Versus what will I do if I think it's just about to happen? And about 10 or 15 years ago, I realized that it didn't make a hell of a lot of difference to me. Because what I had to do, if it was going to be the new age, what did I personally want to bring to the new age? I wanted to bring a quiet mind that had wisdom. I wanted to bring an open heart that had compassion. And what did I want to do with my time? I wanted to do whatever I could to relieve suffering in the universe. If it was going to be the dark end, the best way I could prepare for my own death, since that would be part of it, would be to quiet my mind, open my heart, and relieve the suffering around me. So at that point, it didn't really matter which one it was going to be. It was more like that was all astral fun and games. Yeah. It was a way to juice up your actions, but actually, your actions are determined by what you call dharma. That is, what do you do which relieves suffering in the universe? Since we're all there, the suffering exists. And we are part of it. We're interbeings, as Thich Nhat Hanh talks about it. And you begin to see, after you have seen the suffering, some suffering, and you get horrified and you want to do something about it, you try to do something about it, and you find out to your surprise that your very doing creates more suffering. And that really horrifies you. You even want it to be good, and it's screwed up. I mean, I was part of a foundation, or I am part of a foundation, that does work in Central America. And we ran into a situation where, in our zeal to help these people rebuild their communities after the violence in the 80s, we were coming in and, you know, like Father Christmas and Mother Durga, Lakshmi. And surprisingly enough, the people we were dealing with were seen as a threat to the government, and the government started to disappear them. And here, in our zeal to do good, we were creating this suffering in these people. And we meant to do good. So you begin to realize that if you really want to relieve suffering, you have to work on yourself to extricate your awareness from the limiting conditions that would make your actions distorted because they represent your desires. It's like if you're horny, you see what's makeable. If you're hungry, you see what's edible. If your car doesn't work, you notice repair stations. Your motivation affects your perception. So the question is, how do you extricate yourself from identification with your desires? Does it mean you don't have desires? No. It just means you're not busy desiring it. Like many of you drive cars, and I bet you hurtle through space in a huge metallic thing, making incredibly complex decisions about centrifugal and centripetal force and rates of acceleration and deceleration. And during all that, you're probably tuning the radio or looking for the cops or not inhaling or whatever you do in cars. You work on yourself so that your awareness can be quiet enough so that you can hear the gestalt, you can hear the total existential moment. You can hear it because you be it. The boundaries between self and other dissolve in awareness, and you are one with what is, and out of that comes action, and that's really compassionate action. And I'm going to go into a little more detail about all that, so if it passed you by, don't worry, it passes me by too. The interesting observation I'm now ready to see, because all I've said over these many years is when people said, is it Armageddon or the Aquarian Age? I said, I don't know, and really I don't think it matters. Because I will still become an instrument for the best of what can be, and what will happen will happen. It's not in my hands. But now what I see is more and more clearly that what we are involved in is a transformation in the nature of reality, in the paradigms by which we play. Let me put it in very specific terms. We are seeing a shift in power so that consciousness becomes a dominant dimension of reality, as well as physical, social, psychological reality. This consciousness shift is extremely, extremely interesting. If you look at what's happening in this society in terms of meditation, I mean, I have friends going into Monsanto Chemical Company, one of the truly evil giants in the universe, and teaching their top executives meditation. Now you say, well, that's great. They'll meditate their way into being more destructive. But they're willing to say, look, we know we are destructive. We are employing a huge number of people in our labor force. Let's figure out how to transform this game, but let's do it at a rate that doesn't destroy the whole game in the process of doing it. In other words, I'm finding there is a hearing, even in the business community, that says, I know I am caught in a game that does not have integrity with my deepest values. I know it. I'm willing to recognize that predicament. And just recognizing that dissonance. I mean, when you have people from the 60s who were part of the flowers, the we are one, the love, the consciousness explosion, all of that. And now these people with insurance policies and IRAs and children and school boards and stuff, where did that consciousness go to? Interesting, it didn't go anywhere except sort of underground a little bit because it wasn't practical. And now when I sit down with people who are there are exceptions. Like I sit down with Ben Cohen of Ben and Jerry's. And Ben is working now almost full-time to reduce the military budget by a small amount to cover health, education, and welfare. And he's doing it using his power base of being a part of an empire which by its very nature is destructive to a lot of values. Because the ice cream's so rich. And so good. It's real evil. Now, what I see that's different between somebody like Ben and other people in business is that Ben appreciates his predicament. He sees it from a place where he realizes he's part of the problem. He's not rationalizing his way out of existence to explain a CEO's salary that's 200 times the whatever of his employees. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's absurd. It's obscene. It's obscene. I really see the way in which the shift in reality that happened in the 60s, and you saw it reflected in civil rights, you saw it in anti-Vietnam, you saw it in sexual freedom, you saw it in the psychedelic movement, you saw it in women's rights in the beginning of the environmental movement. This was a major, major explosion of something or other. If you'll pardon the humor, it mushroomed. When I tried to figure out what I would say it was, I would say what happened was we went from a culture that I grew up in that saw the reality of our senses and our thinking mind as absolutely real. And we went through some changes where we then suddenly saw that the reality we thought was absolutely real was in fact relatively real. That's a big change. That's a major change. When I grew up at high school, I was taught Newtonian physics as if it was absolutely real. And then Einstein came along and said, it depends on where you're standing. That's what I mean. It now makes that relatively real. It's real. I was a psychologist. And I really thought I was a psychologist, and I thought psychology was real. And when people walked into my office, because I was a Freudian, all I saw were their psychosexual stages of development, because I had a model of what that reality was. And then suddenly, because of my own experiences with mushrooms, actually, I saw that what was absolutely real was only relatively real. And what's interesting to me now is that that understanding of relative reality has mainstreamed in the society. And what it does is take the vertical patriarchal power structures, and it really shakes the hell out of them. To me, the symbol was back in the 60s when a lot of people surrounded the Pentagon and chanted Om. Now, only a few people saw it rise, actually. But it wasn't whether it rose or not, it was just the fact that they were saying there are other powers besides the power you think you have. They were showing that it was just cardboard. It was cardboard and illusion. They were showing that the institutions that we gave such sanctity to as these monolithic institutions were just those institutions. They were just the creation of the human mind. And they weren't very functional at that. And if you watch our history of the way religion dominated, and then education never really dominated, but religion dominated, then government took over, and government, nation states, big thing. Now we have multinationals. Multinationals are making the nation states bankrupt, basically. They're reshuffling the deck. The shift involved basically a re-empowerment of the individual human heart. It basically was saying, like I go into a church and I see that often the church feels bankrupt because everybody came to get something and everybody took it away. So all you're left with is the external rituals. Then you go into other churches and they are swinging. They are really alive spiritually. And you see it's because the individuals bring to the church spirit. And they feed it, because basically the basic spiritual institution is the individual human heart. And you can juice up institutions or get trapped in the institutional calcification. What I'm pointing to is that you and I hold the secret inside of ourselves as to whether this is Armageddon or the Aquarian Age. Because the basic secret has to do with human consciousness. And it has to do with what used to be called non-ordinary states of awareness. William James, one of the great philosophers, said at one point, our normal waking consciousness is but one type of consciousness, whilst all about it, parted from it by the filmiest of veils, there light other types of consciousness. We may pass our entire lives without knowing of their existence, but apply the requisite stimulus, and there they are in their completeness. Whatever their meaning, they forbid our premature closing of our accounts with reality. Specifically, you took birth, you went into training, you got socialized, you got acculturated, you went into somebody training, you were trained to become somebody. Peter or Rose or Doris or Fred or whatever, Dawn or... And everybody said, hi, Dawn, you said hi, and you knew who you were, and everybody had they all had their thing, their identity. You went in and you became somebody. And the minute they were sure you were somebody, they is us, by the way, so don't get paranoid. The minute they saw that you were somebody, then you went into somebody special training to become somebody really special. I'm so proud of you, you're special. How are you special? Well, I make things with 3 notches in them. Aha. And everybody was special. But then, and it's why I can talk comfortably with this group because of what I assume you're doing here in a Whole Life Expo, is you awaken and you realize you've been had. You realize that your somebodiness is just a somebodiness. It's a trip of the mind. You got caught in who you think you are, and you were trained by people who thought they were real. I mean, didn't your parents think they were real? And they made you think you were real. I mean, the whole thing is this incredible conspiracy of consciousness. and you buy in, and you're galumphing along thinking you're real, and then you awaken. Now, what do you awaken into, and what did you awaken from? Well, here's where language gets really funny to play with. And I've really reflected about this because there are so many maps of so many planes of consciousness in so many traditions. I mean, you can have heavens and hells and mansions. You can have lokas. You can have planes of consciousness. I mean, I can do it in so many ways. Electromagnetic, the laws of seven. I mean, we can go on and on and on. Well, I decided, for my own purposes, I was going to simplify it. And I decided I would settle on 3 planes. The first I would call ego. That's who you got trained to be. That is your software for living on this plane. That's the conceptual structure you have in your mind that tells you where to go to the bathroom, where to eat, where to get sustenance, etc. It tells you who you are and who you think I am. It's the program for you as a separate entity to ward off the disaster of the fact that you are this tiny little thing and the forces around you are vast. I mean, first your parents' knees were up here, then you grew up. But now you've got bombs, and you've got violence, and you've got hunger, and you've got disease, and you've got... So the ego has an incredibly... I mean, I'm using the word ego in a way that ego purists would be upset, but that's okay. I had to use some word. Now, what it is you awaken out of or into, you awaken into what you might call the witness, or in one system, or mindfulness in another system, or an altered state of consciousness in another system, or spiritual awakened person in another system. Now, this second one I am choosing to call by a very, very complex word, because it has so much excess meaning in this society, the word soul. Now, Buddhists are always horrified when I use the word soul, because they have a law, a rule. It's called anatta, which means there is no self. And so what are you doing using another self when we just got rid of a self? What I'm doing it for, I know that, and I agree with it. But what I see is I'm giving you a step on the step ladder, and then all of this is within what happens when you finally surrender your identity, exclusive identity with your separateness. Then the boundaries dissolve and you are in... Now we got a new word we can play with. Which one would you like? How about love? Want awareness? I use awareness. It's neutral. I mean, awareness is like the sky. It embraces, and everything in the sky, you see there's clouds, there's airplanes, there's birds, there's flying saucers, there's kinds of stuff, hang gliders. They're all in the sky. But somehow it doesn't affect the sky. The sky's just there. The sky has all of these in it. These are like phenomena that come and go in the sky, including your body, your personality, your identity, the whole shtick. The interesting thing about your sky and my sky is there's only one sky. There's only one awareness. In other words, at that point, you as a separate entity are no longer the base camp from which you're looking at the universe. Did I lose everybody, or is anybody here? Am I okay? You got to give me reassurance, because you all look like this, and I don't know. There'll be a... Thank you. That was not only my ego needing that, that was soul wisdom to pull that one off there. so what I see is that if you ask me what I'm doing on earth, what is my business, what is the meaning of the game of life, I will answer, I am in the business of awakening into my soul identity and awakening out of my exclusive identity with ego. Now, this does not mean you are destroying the ego. Don't be silly. Why would you destroy such good software? You need it to function here. What you are going to learn to do, and this is inevitable and it is part of what is happening in the world at this moment as we approach the millennium, is we are moving into a domain where consciousness is the currency. And what you are going to learn to do is to live simultaneously on two planes of consciousness. I mean, at first, for some of you, the metaphor is appropriate, and for others, it's like dirty words, but first you get high, and then you come down. Some of you are familiar with that concept. Getting high, coming down. You have sex, you get high. You have a fight, you come down. You cook bouillabaisse, you go up. You get indigestion, you come down. You can feel the whole rhythm of it all. And you say, I want to maximize my highs. I want to stay high all the time. I did that from 1961 until 1974. Basically, I just wanted to get as high as I could and stay there. And first it was psychedelics, and then it was gurus, and it was all the shticks I could find to keep me high all the time. Because when you go into this plane of soul awareness, which is so tasty, you are suddenly in a home in a way that you wonder, where the hell have I been all this time? Being caught in my ego, thinking who I thought I was real. It's what Plato's cave is about. It's what Gurdjieff talking about, escaping from the prison of the mind. This is all the same room we're talking about. And most of us, most of the time, in all of what we call education and growing, are basically rearranging the furniture in our prison cell. We don't seem to be interested in opening the door and walking out. But the fact was, every time I went up, I came down. And then I really saw that that polarity was the problem, and that my aversion to coming down was where the trouble lay. I now knew how to get high as well as anybody in the society. The question was, why wasn't I high all the time? And the answer was because I was pushing away the low. And it changed my game. I turned around and looked at Earth and my incarnation and my humanity and my neurosis and all of my stuff, and I started to reach out to embrace it into my being. And it's a very interesting work. Because when you look at Earth, when you turn around, when you've been looking at the heavens, and I'm coming and holy, 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 and here I come, and Ram, 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 and off we go. And you look down, it's shit. There is suffering everywhere, and it's horrendous. Even the people that aren't suffering are suffering. I mean, you don't have to take gross sufferings like violence, starvation, and poverty, and all of the horrendous things that are happening to billions of us in this wonderful system we've all figured out. But you look at the people who made it, who got it, who won, and you look at the lines in the face, and you look at the sleeping pill prescriptions and the Prozac prescriptions and the whole thing, and you say, who wins in this game? Where are the winners? Where are the people that aren't suffering? And when you look at the root of the suffering is the ignorance in which a person thinks they are only their separate self. They've cut themselves off completely from any nutrition, from the food of being part of the universe. Everything's them. I mean, I was part of it. I was a behavioral psychologist. That treats everything as them, including yourself. Now, the awakening, and so once you have tasted of high, which we'll now call soul, even though soul is only part high, because you haven't gone into pure awareness yet. But let's just say soul is among the high. It's the spiritual realms. You've gotten high. Then you look at another person who's busy saying, I'm not high, I'm responsible. And what you see is a high person who thinks they're somebody else. Okay? Because as you begin to learn how to live in two planes of consciousness at once, where you're both high and down, you're both in the world and you're not in the world. You understand, you become a karma yogi. You're transforming your in the worldness to get high, and you're using your highness to dance in the world as a kind of a celebratory divine dance. When you experience that in yourself, you look and you realize everybody else has got that too. Why is everybody short shrifting themselves so much? Why are they busy thinking they're real? What can you do about it? Can you shake them and say you're not real? I mean, I work a lot with dying people with AIDS or cancer, to help them die, to be with them, to hang out with them while they're dying, on the telephone or in person. It's the most exciting thing I do in my life. It's the highest thing I do in my life. Because there is a way in which people, after it's all hit the fan, are ready for a little truth, a little presence. They're vulnerable, they're open again. Somehow their whole willful ego structure hasn't worked. You get them at the moment it hasn't worked. And you don't come on because what immoral right have you to come on to somebody? They can die their own way. But what you can do is you can work on your own consciousness, and you become an environment for them that doesn't trap them in who they thought they were in case they would like to come up for air. I go into somebody who is in the final states of the AIDS virus infection, with tremendous opportunistic illnesses, social stigma, family rejection, economic hardship. I mean, it is as harsh as society can do, basically. And I walk into the room and my heart breaks for that human being. Young person whose dreams are gone, who's not going to live their life out. As long as I stay in that space in myself, what my mind is mirroring back to them is their pitifulness. But if I can not be so entrapped by the symbolic power of their identity, to be able to shift my consciousness just enough to come back into my mindfulness of saying, person with AIDS, person helping person with AIDS, here we are. I can become an environment with my consciousness. Now we're talking about consciousness, where if that person would like to come up for air into their own soul identity, there's nothing in me that will keep them stuck being an AIDS patient who's dying. It's like if I look at you, and many of you have heard me do this, but I can do it quickly. And we have a little television channel selector right here, and we select it on 1, and you look up here and you see a 65-year-old decaying, attractive man. Okay. Now you shift gears once more to channel 2, and you see a lecturer, spiritual seeker, teacher, neurotic, blah. You see my whole psychosocial shtick. Jew from Boston, middle class, white, You see the whole thing. That's all my psychosocial identity, channel 2. That's as the world turns. Okay. Now, shift the channel again, for this crowd will appreciate that I'm an Aries. In other words, we've just moved into a domain. We can call it the astral domain. We can call it archetypes. We can mythology, whatever it is. It's bigger than life, but it's still, we're somebody's. Well, I'm in search of the Grail. Well, good, because I'm the Divine Mother. Everybody's got their part to play on that plane. You shift the channels once more, and you look into another human being's eyes, and what you see is another being looking out at you. Are you in there? I'm in here. Far out. How did you get into that one? And you see another soul just like you in drag. You see them in their personalities, their astrology, their bodies. They're busy being somebody. And they really think they're real, you know. But yet, when you looked into their eyes, they looked back at you and said, hey, I'm in here too. Far out. How did we get caught in this thing? What an incredible dance. And that's where soul consciousness starts to be fun. And I've had the privilege in life of finding many, many, many soul associates, soul friends, people who we can meet in soul awareness and delight in the dance of our egos with all their neurosis and all their shtick and all the suffering and dying and all of the stuff. The minute you identify with the soul, not to the exclusion of the ego, but at least equally balanced with it, your whole attitude towards death and suffering changes. Because I'd like to ask you, which of those two planes clearly do you know dies? And I'll tell you, it's the physical ego stage that dies. And there's another part of you. Now, that's what's interesting about the quality of this other part, this soul. When you meet a person, and you can get up to the channel where you meet them as a fellow soul, delighting in the universe, the play of the universe, or scared by it or whatever, but they wouldn't be scared because they'd see it if they were really resting in soul awareness. The medium that you meet in, this is complicated. I hesitate to, well, the medium you meet in, you could call shared presence. It's like, are you here? I'm here. Here we are. Be here now. There's another word you could call it, though. You could call it love. You could say, we are meeting in love. I'm not talking about romantic love, not I love you, but here we are in this place of enoughness, a place of fulfillment, of fullness, of presence, of appreciation of the way it is, why it is, of looking at the laws of karma, the laws of the universe, and saying, yeah, right, so. And saying so to cancer, and saying so to anything, saying so. That's the way it is. So, I understand. From that place of consciousness, your ability to hear how to play the ego dance changes considerably. Because you're no longer so identified. It's like playing Monopoly. Do you think you're the iron or the top hat? Or do you think you're the person throwing the dice and playing? Or do you think you're the person that created the game, which includes you? The fact is, these three planes are, you are the player, you are the piece on the board that's getting Marvin Gardens. You are the player, the soul is the player. And you are awareness in that the board and the players and you and all of it is all part of, it's an internal matter. It's nothing personal, it's an internal matter. It's the way it all is. Our journey in life has to do with extricating ourselves from exclusive ego identity to live simultaneously on soul awareness and on ego plane. So you're impeccable on the ego plane, but you're not trapped in it. You're not trapped in birth or death or suffering or sickness. It is all there and you feel it and your heart's breaking, but another part of you is saying, so. It's what the Tao says when it says, one does nothing and nothing is left undone. That's two planes of consciousness. You're resting inside, just like when you're driving. You weren't driving, you were doing something else. You could be at rest and your whole life would be lived out like driving is. Driving. Depression. I mean, the difference between I'm depressed and look at that depression. Those are two different planes of consciousness. One shows you a way out and one doesn't. Somebody says, I'm depressed. I said, are you aware you're depressed? They said, yes. I said, well, then it's your problem. When you're tired of it, you'll give it up. Now, what that seems to be doing is profaning personality. And I think it could use a little of that in this society. This society seems absolutely obsessed with personality. What do I want? What do I need? What do I desire? Who should I be with? Will I make it? Did I achieve? Am I successful? It's all fun, but it's really, really like children's toys. It isn't that interesting. And I'm saying that as an old psychotherapist and as somebody trained in personality who taught that stuff as if it was real. At Stanford even, so they thought it was real too. And then at Harvard, where they thought it was real, till they began to suspect I didn't think it was as real as they thought it was. It's fun to be thrown out of an institution as august as Harvard and to know you're right. I mean, can you realize how bizarre that is? There was a press conference after I got thrown out, because I was the first professor in the 20th century to be thrown out. And I mean, I was the person that was going to now go to the gym and sweep it, I mean, had lost the big fight. I mean, you take on Harvard, it's like Harvard and Stanford and Yale. And inside me, as I was looking around at all these television and radio people, all of whom had that look of, it's too bad what's happened. I felt inside of myself, my God, I've won. And then I thought, because I'm a psychologist, there is psychosis. When you think what you think is true and nobody else does, you're nuts. And then I thought, okay, then I'll be nuts. And what I've turned out is there are a lot of other nutty people, and if I don't scare people too much, most people would like to be nuts the same way I'm nuts, which is really far out. I mean, do you realize what a mind-blowing years these have been? So the sequence is, in some way you awaken out of your somebodiness, and you don't have to blow yourself away to do it. It is really, as the conceptual structures are available, you can recognize the different levels of your consciousness, because all of it is available to everybody all the time. You're just busy not seeing it. It's as if your highest being, you're busy not acknowledging is real, because you're so busy thinking who you think you are is real that you treat all that as static or something. I was out of my mind. I didn't know what I was doing. Good, stay out of it. I mean, when Tim said turn on, tune in, and drop out, the dropout had a revolutionary quality to it. And I think this game is actually more interesting than a revolution. I think this is consciousness evolution, and that we are part of an evolutionary process. I don't think we have to push against the system. The system slowly, if you don't make the polarity, will slowly transform itself. I was with a wonderful, wonderful gentleman, a very unusual gentleman. His name is Lawrence Rockefeller, and he's 86, and he's the elder of the Rockefeller clan. And he was busy setting up professorships of consciousness at different universities. Because consciousness is the word that gets you in between where science goes and where the Meshuggah people go. Consciousness is the legitimate word they're trying to save now, because you don't know how to, I mean, they got to deal with mind. They finally have to deal with the fact that everything that goes on in us does not have a biochemical equivalent in the frequencies they're measuring. Okay? So I said, well, you know, they'll pervert whatever you do as setting up a professorship. Like Mrs. Stanford down at Stanford left a lot of her money for occult studies. You think much of it's been used by Stanford for that purpose? You should imagine they take lawyers to figure out how to do what Mrs. Stanford wanted without doing it. Isn't that bizarre? So he said, I said, they'll probably pervert it. He said, well, I gave what I wanted, this course in consciousness, to the president of, I don't remember, Princeton or one of those places. And he thought about it overnight. He came back with another title, which was already part of the way they were doing it. I said, well, aren't you concerned that they're changing the title? He says, no, you've got to understand, the new paradigm has happened. They're already losing. You've got to allow them to save face. Isn't that a bizarre statement for an 86-year-old? I mean, that is really interesting to me. Extraordinary. I mean, Lawrence is one of the backers of Prop 215. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? It's pretty interesting. Now, I think I probably, instead of continuing, I should take some questions. Would that be appropriate? Because I can talk forever, as you can see. And I'm fascinating. So... Yes, yes. Good. Now I become Oprah Winfrey. We can go on. I mean, I'll answer this. I'll say the same thing whether I'm answering a question or not, so it doesn't matter. Questions? Yeah. I'll repeat the question for everybody.
Do you think it really makes any difference in one's attempt to wake up, whether or not they meditate, do spiritual rituals?
Does it matter in waking up whether you do all these things like meditation and all of this spiritual rigmarole? No. However, once you see that awakening is possible, you'd be a damn fool to walk away from it. And when you don't want to walk away from it, you start to look around at what you can do in life to stabilize yourself in this kind of consciousness. And a lot of these practices become useful for doing that. And that attracts you to doing them because, and ultimately, while you may use meditation as a practice or devotion or church or whatever, ultimately, you will see as the pull gets stronger and the realization of the truth of your identity gets deeper, every act in your life becomes a vehicle for the process. It all becomes method. Everything. Your fights, your horniness, your laziness, your achievement, your fear, it all becomes the grist for the mill of the process of awakening, okay? And I'd say that every method is a trap because it traps you in being somebody using a method. And for a method to work, ultimately it should self-destruct. You don't want to end up being a meditator, you want to end up being the Buddha or a free being, you know? And it's true with psychedelics, it's true with meditation, it's true with service, it's true with Christianity, it's true across the board. You don't want to be a Christian, you want to be Christ. And that's the one, this is the heresy. This is the heresy, and I might as well just say it out front. See? Because we are all awareness in drag. And what awareness is what awareness is. It's the non-form, it's the universe, the unmanifest universe. It is why G-D is the unspoken word. It's all the names, our fingers pointing at the moon. And it turns out this is the moon. Questions? Yeah. Say it once louder. What extent do I think technology will play a role in the evolution of consciousness? I would say a profound role. I mean, LSD, God bless it. That's technology. I mean, but I mean, what I'm seeing is as I get on the internet and, you know, my email correspondence gets more diverse and all this stuff, I can feel the way in which the collective consciousness is starting to meet in, I mean, virtual reality is not just a plaything. Virtual reality is a statement of these other planes of consciousness. And we will at first use it in the old-fashioned way, in the way we thought we were, but slowly it starts to work its magic and you start to become, I mean, we've been very concerned about the imbalance that happened ever since really the Industrial Revolution. I don't know where it started. Industrial Revolution is a good place. I used to say the 60s, but I was faulted for that. Of an obsession with individualism. You know, another ism. Individualism and me. And me, sorry folks, can't be with the family, gotta go, because I've got my thing to do. And what we did in the process of doing that, as I'm seeing very clearly in the work I'm doing with aging now, is that we threw the baby out with the bath. We lost our sense of network or web or interdependency or community or however, whatever metaphor you want for that. I think any technology can be unuseful. I mean, television, people say, is it unuseful? You know, is it bad? What it's doing is burning out something in a lot of people. I mean, it might take a generation of couch potatoes, but something else comes. I mean, they still reproduce, you know, and then something else happens. So I'm optimistic, yes. Questions? Yeah. On the path, how do you differentiate between ego awareness or ego consciousness and soul consciousness? It's very, very subtle, tricky stuff. And you'll fall on your face many times, just like I do. Oh, I'm a soul, I'm so aware, says my ego. So that's where you learn how to not elevate your thoughts that much about I think I'm a soul or I think I'm an ego. Just go back to whatever you're, like for me, my beads or my breath, just rising, falling, just staying with my breath, cuts me out of the thinking mind of where I think I'm going and who I think I am and what I think I'm becoming. Just brings me back to breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. Not I think I'm breathing in or I'm watching myself breathe in, but breathing in, breathing out. I mean, you learn the the techniques, they're not religious, they're just techniques for concentration of mind to show you the way in which certain thoughts are trapping you into seeing its reality. Yeah. What are my current thoughts about the role of psychedelics in what? On a mindful path. Well, I'll tell you, first of all, I would be a terrible hypocrite and phony if I didn't honor the role they played in my life, because it's been extremely profound. I am also aware, as I said earlier, that a lot of the profound things that I understood in the 60s through psychedelics are now mainstream consciousness. In other words, you don't need to use that to get there, because there is a much more supportive environment for acknowledging the reality of these planes, which everybody has, but people are busy not having it. Because every time you took psychedelics, you opened up and you say, well, I'm here again. I know this place. This is familiar. Well, it's familiar to everybody. It's just they're busy not knowing it. And once you give them a setting where it's all right to know it, they start to allow themselves to recognize it. So the first thing is the culture has changed. And using psychedelics as a spiritual path, I still think is very profound. However, in a society where there is this much drug paranoia and the illegality is so strong, you've got to realize, as we found out in the 60s in our research, that set and setting are critical factors in the nature of the experience you have when you alter your consciousness. And the setting in this culture for using this is tricky business, because it comes with a lot of paranoia. And you've got to find a way to extricate yourself from that paranoid setting. Otherwise, it pre-programs the trip you're on. All right? Is that a fair statement? Sir. I can hear you. Go ahead. Absolutely. If you're already in Detroit, you don't have to take a bus to Detroit. That's true for all spiritual methods. The method is only there to extricate yourself from the illusion that you thought the ego was the only thing that was real. Once you're out of that, as you're pointing out, then you're not using methods to get there because you're already there. What you're using methods for then is to just stabilize yourself in that space. But there is no particular reason. I mean, once you're stabilized with faith in that space of soul awareness, everything is, you use methods entirely differently. I mean, you would only use methods that would be harmonious with the whole game. You wouldn't use methods that you wouldn't have the desperateness of being cut off. You would already feel like you were home. And then it becomes more of a celebratory use. Like my guru used to go Ram, 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 Ram all day, and he wasn't doing it to get high. I mean, he was doing it because what else to do other than just keep remembering? I haven't talked much about the real fun place, which was when you finish with all this kind of ego obsession and you're resting in soul, then the pull towards awareness, the pull of the separateness to be one with the one becomes more and more powerful. This is the poetry of Rumi and Hafiz and Kabir and all of the mystic poets, the Psalms and the songs and all of these wonderful things that are really the soul's yearning to be with God, the lover and the beloved merging. I mean, that's what that part is about. That's the higher quality of devotional yoga, and that's really what our business is. When we finish this other business, we got to clean up first, which is our egos. Yes. Let me explain. She says whether these planes of consciousness exist within, like, the soul level, for example, higher souls and lower souls. I'm sure they do. I just reduced it because the whole game of judging bores me, you know? higher, lower, I don't know. I'll do it. I'll develop my mindfulness so that I can say, so, look at this. There's pain, there's suffering, there's joy, there's birth, there's death, there's aging, there's spots, you know. I mean, I look at my hand and it's got wrinkles and blood vessels and aging spots. It's far out. The Porcelana ad says, they call these aging spots, I call them ugly. Okay? And I look at this and I say, they call these ugly, I call them aging spots. And I think that's beautiful. It's a nice, old, beautiful hand, you know. What did I want? So, yes. Questions? Yes. I would say that the candidates are, they are both good people trying to do good, basically. I don't think they're evil people, all right? I think that there is a certain degree of stupidity in them. I don't think the conversation we're having about soul awareness is relevant to them. I do not experience, and I really wanted to experience with Bill Clinton, that he was aware. I think he's incredibly intelligent and very clever. I think he's sort of as good as the mind game gets, but I think it is an old-fashioned game. And I don't think you should look to a political candidate at this moment for where the social change is going to come from. You've got to realize that they are locked into a web of forces, that you're just looking at the front person for a whole system of which we are all part. So where I start changing is me, because I see that as I change, every energy I put out to everybody keeps changing, and they meet and they change, and that's the way. Once you understand the information web and realize that information is the grossest form of it, that there is also energetic webs and all kinds of levels of webs, you realize that everybody is equally powerful, which is a bizarre thought. And then you realize that as you work on yourself, you change the world. And that doesn't mean you don't be a social activist, but use your social activism to work on yourself. When I do a protest or something like that, I am protesting against what I determine as inappropriate or behavior that's creating suffering. But if I do it in a way that closes my heart towards the people I'm opposing, forget it. I've just created more suffering. And that's the kind of idealism. Yeah, okay. Question?
Sir, you talk about integrity as a method of growth, or as a trap.
Is integrity a practice to grow, to bring about integrity, or is it a clever ruse of the ego? I would say that until the very last moment of enlightenment, of freedom, it's all ego. I mean, until you dissolve, till you aren't, and then you are but you're not, but you are resting in not. Until that happens, it all is an ego trip. So I'd say everything I'd say is an ego trip. All practices are ego trips. All right? But what they are is the ego that's saying, I can do this practice because it'll never amount to anything. And the fact is, the practices are powerful and they do something. And we do change. We do change. And and as we create a setting of consciousness that is our collective consciousness that allows for the reality of these other planes of awareness, other people can change much more readily. And then it becomes sort of like the 100th monkey thing or something like that. But the change is basically, the intention to change is an ego statement. Am I dealing with your question? Yeah. Yes. I think he asked if you dichotomize a human being into a mind and a body, how is one to achieve oneness? That dichotomy What you're doing is at a stage of the process of awakening, you're acknowledging the dichotomy in order to balance the dichotomy, in order to eat it alive, to bring about the unity. These are stages in the process. I agree, but you see, like when body was the only reality, then you bring in mind. Now the fact is, mind is not separate from body, but you bring it in order to bring attention to it. You work to cultivate resting in mind, and if in doing that you pushed away body, you're not free, then you embrace body as mind, and then mind and body become one thing in the full embracing of it. So these are just stages in the game. Am I dealing with your question? Yeah. Yes. What'd you say? Yeah. Yeah. What do you mean by acceptance? Accepting your own being, you mean? Yeah. He's asking two questions. The second one is, when you're trying to focus on one thing and some other thought comes in and says, think me, I'm real, what do? First of all, if you get upset about it, it's got you. If you try to push it away, it's got you. I mean, it's just waiting to get you. You know, like you sit down and meditate and you're all comfortable and you think, I'm hungry. See? And then you think of a particularly good piece of tofu in the refrigerator. You know, and you're right there. And so it's a thought. At that moment, you sat down to follow your breath, say. So what you do when another thought comes up is you acknowledge it, sort of bow to it, allow it, and then as quickly as you can comfortably go back to your primary object. You keep coming back to your primary object again and again and again. 1,000,000 times, and 1,000,001 you'll be distracted, and you keep coming back. Okay? That's the answer to your second question. In terms of and some of them are very powerful that come along, you know, that say, think me, I'm real. And the other question is acceptance. How do we accept or acknowledge our true being? Embrace whatever is dark. I'll tell you, it's hard to embrace whatever is dark when you're busy being just an ego, because it's very threatening to the ego. For the soul, it's a lot easier, because the soul, the relation of ego to soul, which I was hoping to avoid, but I can't, is that, and I'm just going to say it out, and then you can disagree, because I don't even know that I agree, but it seems right. Somebody's thinking it here. The soul has karma. The soul is unique. The soul is a unique entity working through a unique set of psychic DNA that is going to manifest. It manifests on many planes, some of which you're in at this moment, like body incarnation. It manifests in your dreams. It manifests on many, many planes. All of these are working out the karma of the soul. When you're resting in the soul, you appreciate how your karma is working out, so that if you have some disease, or if you have some great success, instead of getting, success, and disease, the soul just says, success, disease. I mean, I'll tell you the heaviest statements about it, like, one to me is loss and gain. Like that one? Try, one to me is fame and shame. That was fun. I've worked with that. One to me is pleasure and pain. That's interesting. I mean, can you really imagine getting to a place in your awareness where you can say, pleasure, pain, enjoy the pleasure, work with the pain, without getting completely lost in I'm in pain or I'm in pleasure? If you buy one, you got the other, let me tell you. You can't buy one of a polarity without having the other. You want good, you got evil. It's the way it is. Okay. Try, one to me is life and death. Ready? That changes the whole culture right there, just that one thought. When you live as if that were true, Your fear of death changes. When your fear of death changes, the way you live your life changes. The whole structure of the society is based on titillating and playing with and awakening the fear of death. It's deep, deep in the culture. Deep, deep in the culture. And our job is to escape. That's what we are doing. And as we escape, so everyone escapes. You work on yourself as your gift to the whole game. That's the way you work. Yes? Is addiction just another thought demanding attention, or is it something else? Well, it all depends. I mean, if it's a psychological addiction, it's probably just another thought. But it could be a biochemical addiction, in which what you're experiencing is pain and discomfort and suffering or pain from like hunger contractions or the need or a hunger, a strong. It's very hard not to get identified with that desire at that moment. But it's still just a desire system. And people that go cold turkey find that out. I mean, but it's hard because those are very compelling desires. And people that are dying, you can say, well, dying is the most compelling thing to stay alive. But you can see, I work with a lot of people who come into soul awareness and say, dropping my body, so. Here we go. And then we look at it as death is a moment in which you face the adventure, the mystery. You face the mystery of the non-conceptual universe, because all of the concepts about what happens after death are just concepts. They're the concepts of mind trying to speak about the unspeakable. And you're right at the edge of the mystery, going into just right at the edge, going into the mystery, right there. And wouldn't you like at that moment of death to be surrounded by people saying, wow, yeah, here we are, we're supporting you, go baby, go. Versus, no, don't leave here, let's pump you, feed you, do something, don't let you go. Isn't that interesting? That's a major cultural shift that will occur, by the way, in this millennium period. Sir? What is reality? I think it would be, I'm probably on thin ice, but I'll say it's really a map that you hold of what exists, and you call that reality. And I'd say that what happened, we're talking about shifting maps, shifting paradigms, shifting perspectives, okay? And so, like, if you go to sleep and you dream, in your dream, you are in another reality. Then you awaken and you say, oh, it was just a dream. You've come into this reality, this model, this definition of the phenomena you're experiencing. Later, you wake up out of this one and say, it was a dream. My God, I could have sworn I was at the fashion center and I was hearing Ram Dass speak. It seemed so real. I mean, it looked like you could go up and touch him. Am I dealing with the question? That's absolutely right. Everyone has their own reality. And if you watch people come down the street, each person is telling you who they think they are and who they think you are within their reality. So somebody comes up to me and says, Ram Dass, what an honor to meet you. Yes, see? That's playing in their reality. Somebody else comes up and says, hi, Dick. Hi, another reality. And what you learn, the art form of awakening, is not to get sucked into other people's projections. Because they're projecting their reality all the time, and they're saying, and what we have in a culture is a conspiracy to see reality a certain way. So when you're going to awaken, which is what our work is, we are awakening out of our own acculturation. We've been had. We're awakening out of being had. It's a very yum, yum, yum. Okay, I have to stop, everybody. It's the time to stop. Thank you very much.